Have you ever sought eternal life? Imagine living forever! Hello and welcome to the Bottled Imp, exploring the realms of fantasy. My name is Ken Boyter, and today we're taking a look at Guillermo. How do you pronounce his name? That's even worse than we did. That is the worst time I've ever pronounced it like that. Guillermo. Gil. I know him as Gil. Guillermo del Toro. And we're looking at, this is a collection actually, this is a special edition. This has got 3 of his films here. We've looked at Pan's Labyrinth. We're going to be looking at Cronos. And at some point, we're going to be looking at The Devil's Backbone. But today, it's Cronos, or Cronos. I don't know how to pronounce that either. Do I know how to speak? Let's find out. I was curious to find out what Del Toro's first feature film was all about. I absolutely love Pan's Labyrinth. I think it's one of the best films, let alone fantasy films, best films ever made. We do have a review of that, so check out what I think in detail. So I was curious though, what was his first feature film like? It was released in 1993, and it had quite a small budget. I think it was something like $2 million. So obviously back then, even now, I mean, that's a tiny fraction of the money that big Hollywood blockbusters have to spend. And he's since gone on to have a wonderful career, you know, Hellboy, for example, you know, with a big budget. But what can he do with less money? Well, let's do the setup first. Now, the setup of Cronos is where it's set. It's a little bit of a kind of, a pre-set up to the actual main story. That's not the proper way of describing that, but I can't think what the name is. And it's set in 1536, and it focuses on an alchemist, and he's also a watchmaker. So I think to the general public he's more of a watchmaker, but he dabbles in the dark arts of alchemy. And what he does there is, this alchemist, he actually creates a mechanical device. And I don't want to go into too much about the whole device, because that's part of the mystery, part of the wonder when you actually watch the film. But what I will say is that this device actually manages to give the person that owns it, or that uses it I should say, eternal life. Because fast forward, and it's about 400 years later, there's a collapsed building, there's police officers going in there trying to find any survivors, and we see this pure white kind of guy who's very shiny, and he's very old and very decrepit, but he's clutching this Cronos device, or Cronos, however you pronounce it. And yeah, he's actually been killed. And the reason why he's been killed is that his heart has been pierced by an object that's sharp and pointy that will pierce hearts. So he's actually dead. So we connect the two. It's obviously the alchemist, and he has managed to live these 400 years, which is quite extraordinary. And then you fast forward again to present day. And it's present day Mexico, and basically all the focus is on this antique shop, because yes, you've probably guessed it, the Cronos device is in this antique shop, but it's actually been stored away, it's been hidden away in these archangel figures. Over the years there's been these archangel figures that are all the same, but only one of them is where they put the Cronos device. And so it focuses on this antique dealer. Now, he's quite an elderly gentleman. He's a family man. He's a grandfather, but he's a family man. He's very kind, he's very sweet, he's very caring. And so a big portion of the film is kind of setting this story up and setting those other stories up. And basically he gets a visit from none other than Hellboy himself. Ron Perlman turns up. Yes, I know, an early Ron Perlman appearance. And he is interested in this archangel, but he doesn't look like the type of guy that would be interested in antiques. So that raises the suspicion of the antique dealer. So he then starts looking at this archangel slightly differently, because that's the object that Ron Perlman was interested in. And he doesn't buy it, though. He goes off and we don't know, why he's interested in this archangel to begin with, and who he's working for, that kind of thing. But the antique dealer, he's getting a bit curious, so he starts examining this statue and finds that there's a hollow base to it, and he thinks, oh, okay. So he smash opens the bottom of it, and he finds the Cronos device. And what happens after that? Well, I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but let's say that he starts using this device, and it changes his life forever. Obviously, there will be someone else that knows about this device. And yes, there is. The Ron Perlman character goes back to, I think it's his father. I'm pretty sure it's his father, or it's his uncle. And this uncle character, he's been after this device. He's got all these archangels lined up, obviously the ones that the Cronos device hasn't been in. I don't know why he keeps them still, but anyway, he's got them all hanging around. And it's a bit kind of morbid, it's a bit kind of shady, it's a bit dark and dingy where this uncle lives. You're not quite sure why he lives like this. He kind of lives in a factory. It's a bit strange. And so you think, okay, he's obviously not going to be a good person. He's not going to be the sort of person that you want to go out for a pint with. And he wants this device. So he sends Ron Perlman back to buy the device. But obviously, it's not there anymore. But he knows that the old man, this old antique dealer, must have the device. And so that is basically what happens. That's the next sort of large portion of the film. In fact, that's most of what the film is. So the plot itself is quite a simple setup. There's a Cronos device that grants you eternal life. And it's fallen into the hands of somebody pretty normal, pretty average, a loving grandfather, family man. And it's like, well, what does he do with it? Well, he gets fascinated by this. He does use the device and he does get fascinated by it. And as I say, it changes his life. And then you get somebody else who wants it. They want it. They know exactly what it's about and they want to find it. And so basically that is the plot. The themes of the film, well, it deals with obviously the biggie, which is eternal life. And I guess on the flip side, when I was thinking about, well, why do people want eternal life? And you kind of think, yes, it's because I could live forever and I can, read every book. I could read all the books I want. I could play all the video games that I ever wanted to do. I could play all the board games. Or it's like, well, obviously I can achieve much more than that. I could, I don't know. Anyway, why would you want eternal life? And that is quite a deep question. And then I thought, actually, underlying all of that, it's probably fear. It's that fear of dying. So it's not necessarily that you're wanting to live forever because you want to do good or you want to do lots of things. Is it just as simple as, well, I'm afraid to die? There's that fear factor. I don't want to just disappear. And what if you don't believe in the afterlife? You kind of think, well, that's it. I've got 80 years, 90 years, whatever, 100 years on this planet. What if I don't want to die? Especially when you're young, you don't ever think about death, really. You don't want to die. And there's that fear that you're never going to exist anymore. I will never exist anymore. Now, some people might think that's a good thing. But do you know what I mean? There's that feeling of, I'm actually scared of dying. So is there anything that can prevent me from dying? And I think that maybe is an underlying factor to why people actually want eternal life. So those are the two kind of main themes. The other one, there is an underlying theme of family. And actually, so there is kind of like a good versus dark scenario going on here, which, in a lot of fantasy that does happen, that, somebody wants this eternal life kind of for evil purposes, but then you've got the family man who kind of wants it. He's got all good intentions, but then it becomes the heavy cost. The other theme is be careful what you wish for. And because before you know it, you could be, wanting something and then it turns out not to be exactly what you think it is. And with anything, the phrase, with every piece of magic that you use, there is a price. There is always a cost. There's always a downside to something. And likewise, with the Cronos device, there is definitely a downside to it. So those are the kind of main themes. The production values are pretty good. This was 1993. It's very well, the pacing is okay. There's a few bits that I was a little bit, bored with it. The acting is pretty solid. It's pretty good. The guy that plays the grandfather is really well cast, and he I don't want to give too much away. There is quite a lot of transformation going on there with his character, so he's quite a well-rounded character in that respect, and he does very well. He's very convincing. Ron Perlman is a little bit over the top, though. It is a little bit hammy. But I think he gets away with it just because of the kind of character it is. His character is kind of like the thug just getting the object. So it's a little bit stereotyped in that respect. There's not really too much character development going on there. The person that he's working for, I think it's his uncle, again, not too much character developing there. It's a little bit cliched. But that said, it's not nail-bitingly bad or cringy, the acting. It is, you can watch it without actually, being turned off by it. There's dark humour that runs through it, so that's a delightful surprise. That's a nice, welcome surprise. It kind of leans more towards the horror genre than kind of pure fantasy. But there are fantasy elements in there, and again, I don't want to give it away what the big fantasy thing is. But yes, so if you do like fantasy and you like a bit of horror there mixed in with your fantasy, I would definitely say that you're going to like this. The music is very good. It does a good job of just keeping the action moving along when it needs to. And there's a little girl that's, as I say, the granddaughter of this grandfather. She is very good in it. Is it a girl? I'm just trying to think it's a boy or a girl. Anyway, I was very impressed. If it was a boy or a girl, I was still very impressed. I thought their performance was, it was believable, and that, I didn't go, that's really kind of broken the magic. So yeah, I thought the acting was good on the whole, and it was very passable. The plot did get a little bit convoluted after a while. I did think there were a few scenes that were put in there that didn't really need to be there. But apart from that, I thought it was quite a good, solid first feature film. If you're into horror, if you're really into horror, I would say definitely watch this. If you're more into fantasy and you're not that fussed about the horror, you probably could give this a miss. Whereas what I'd say with Pan's Labyrinth, I would say no, do not miss Pan's Labyrinth. The fantasy is amazing, even though there's quite horrific things in there, and it is kind of, pretty much horror as well. There's a different flavour to it. This one, though, I do love the setup. I really enjoyed, the alchemist at the beginning with this little device that can give you eternal life. I thought that was fantastic, and I liked all that kind of backstory. I personally wish it was more like that. It was in present day. I wanted a bit more to it, but it was a very clever look at a possibility if somebody does create a device that can actually give you eternal life. And then you think, well, how does it give you eternal life? Is it a potion that you drink? Well, not quite, but so that's an interesting concept as well. So overall, I would say, yeah, you can see from this first feature film of his why he's gone on to be a very, very successful director and a very imaginative director. He was going to be directing The Hobbit, but unfortunately, there was delays with that and he couldn't quite fulfill that commitment. But yeah, you can see where Hellboy's come from. You can see where Pan's Labyrinth has gone from. I mean, he wrote this as well. So it's a very, very good first feature film. There we go. Cronos. Cronos. Del Toro's first feature film. Hope you enjoyed that little review there. As I say, we've reviewed Pan's Labyrinth, and we will in the future be reviewing The Devil's Backbone. You can check us out on all social media, obviously. But for now, all I have to say is, keep it unreal.